Hi, and welcome to the first update for the Erado team. My name is Justin Lynch, and I will be leading you through this presentation. So for this introduction, I plan to explain to you what Erado is about, the fiction behind the game, show you some concept art, and also explain some of the basic mechanics that we have for the game. Let's go ahead and dive into our first subject. What is Erado? To help our team better define the game, we created a racer statement, which goes along the lines of an escort mission full of destruction. Obviously, that's not real descriptive, and we'll get into that a little bit more when we get to the mechanics. We also have an underlying theme of this relationship between the girl and the demon, and we will be explaining that shortly as well. Having said that, let's move on to the fiction. I'm going to have the lead designer for the game, Aaron, here, go ahead and explain some of the fiction.
So, Erado is a story about a girl who grows up in a society that has no faith, no belief, and most of all, no religion of any kind. And this society is kind of behind the times. They get by with what they can do, but technologically they're less advanced than the rest of their world. And this girl is constantly read ancient stories by her mother, who has this fancy book that's full of just creatures of yore that may or may not have existed, but not necessarily things that people put any stock into, and they've completely moved on from these ancient times. And so her society that she's growing up in becomes subject to an invasion by the Sovereign. And the Sovereign is a more technological race, a fascist regime, if you will, who believes that other races and other cultures are inferior to them because they control their own destiny with their technology and their power. And so the girl's country is invaded by the Sovereign, and the Sovereign enact what they call the correction. And the correction is basically the taking of a country's people and enslaving them in an attempt to convert them to a force that can be used to further Sovereign's empire. And in the process, they take their slaves and they partially blind them, not so much so that they're ineffective, but more so that they can carry out slave duties, but find it difficult to escape. And so this girl and her family are taken as slaves, and they're blinded. And eventually, the Sovereign move her parents further into the city because they're adults, they're better workers, and they'll be more efficient in the inner city doing different tasks. So she becomes separated from her parents. And after that, she becomes increasingly depressed. And being depressed, she stops working. And the Sovereign, being who they are, would just as soon get rid of a problem rather than try and fix it. Or they fix it by getting rid of the problem. So they set her to be executed. And in the execution chamber, as the girl is about to be executed, she remembers these stories that her mother read to her, and she wishes that everything would just go away. And in doing that, she conjures up the demon of destruction, a creature who hasn't existed in many generations, and he now exists solely because the girl believes in him. So the demon exists to the girl, but no one else can see the demon because no one else has belief in him. And so they develop this bond, this unholy bond per se, where she needs him to help her get to the inner city because she's not strong enough to fight the Sovereign herself. And he needs her because without her, he doesn't exist. And basically the story revolves around the girl trying to get to the inner city through the powers of the demon and through the destruction that he can cause.
Thank you, Aaron. So now we are going to go into some art and some of the concepts that our artists have come up with. One of the first things that we wanted to do was to establish a color palette for the game as well, that all the artists would use when they did their concepts and also when they started building the actual art assets themselves. So as you can see right here, this is our established color palette that we have used. And as we move on to the demon concept art, you can see how this color palette influenced the final coloration of the demon himself, which is in the upper right of the 3 pictures you see right here. And before we move on, I will just go ahead and leave these concepts on the screen for just a little bit longer so you can get a good look at them. And let's go ahead and move on to the girls concept art, which you can see right here. And once again, I will just go ahead and leave this on the screen for a few seconds so you can get a good look at them. Moving right along, we're going to go to the soldier concept art, which can be seen here. This also shows the process that we go through sometimes with our concepts, where the artist will do something and our lead artist will go through and make notes about the art itself, and then on the far right you can see the corrections that the artist made based off the notes he was given. And finally, we have some concept art for our buildings and our environment. The first set of pictures you see right here are concept arts for the actual buildings themselves. And the picture you see right here is for the environment as well. This was to kind of help us establish our mood and our tone, as well as also just having concept art for the buildings themselves. So now that we've shown you some concept art, we will go ahead and move into the last part of this video, which is going to be explaining some of the basic mechanics of our game. The first major mechanic we want to talk about is once again emphasizing that relationship between the girl and the demon. We accomplish this through 3 main ideas. The first is that if the girl dies, the demon dies as well. And this is explained in the fiction a little bit, where the only reason the demon exists is because the girl actually believes in him. The second one is that the demon is invincible, and also invisible to anyone other than the girl. What this does is this creates the ability where the player essentially plays an invincible character, but because of the relationship between the girl and the demon, the girl actually acts as a player's health pool. And the last one is that the demon has to be within a certain distance of the girl to be able to actually use his powers. And once again, this is just kind of emphasized by the bond that the two share. Moving on from that, I want to actually talk about what the player will actually be doing when they're playing the game. The first thing that the player will be doing is using the ability Erode. This allows the player to essentially destroy anything in the environment. And when we say anything, we mean anything. We want to have a fully destructible environment for the game, which we already know creates design problems, but we are already planning on addressing that as well. The other main thing that the player will be doing is indirectly controlling the girl. This is done based off of her personality, which the player will be able to influence throughout the game. And this affects the way that she interacts not only with enemies, but with the demon himself. So that is it for our introduction to Erado. We hope that you found this interesting, and we look forward to having you watch our weekly updates.